Here in Nigeria, the military has secured northwestern Kaduna-bound train, which was attacked by terrorists. Passengers and the injured have been taken to hospitals for medical attention. Earlier on Monday evening, terrorists reportedly bombed a train around the Duse axis in Kaduna State. The train was transporting passengers from the capital, Abuja. The managing director of the Nigerian Railway Corporation, Fintechs, confirmed the incident to Arise News. The Kaduna State government says it will liaise with the Railway Corporation to ascertain the number of passengers who have been abducted. Meanwhile, Nigerian military authorities have cleared the air on the recent reported attack on Kaduna International Airport by terrorists. According to the military, the incident took place 6 kilometers away from the terminal and outside the airport perimeter fence. Also, the military said they killed 12 of the terrorists who were immediately given a hot chase through airstrikes. Arise News correspondent Nisi Gabriel reports.
En route to the Kaduna International Airport are sites of bushes and a few settlements around. Straight to the scene of the incident, where an airport staff was shot dead. Trails of blood of the deceased could be seen on the floor close to the perimeter fence. The military said the incident occurred 6 kilometers away from the terminal, and the terrorists were given a hot chase afterwards.
We believe that these guys were passing through towards Riawa and then into Riawa forest areas. And then seeing this guard here was just an opportunity for them to engage him, just to send the kind of message. It was just an opportunity. It's not like they had any intention of attacking the airport. You came in from the airport, from the tarmac area to this area. You saw the miles you covered. You know, a lot of kilometers you covered to get to this place. So there's no way they would have entered the airport to come and cause problems there, because the insinuation outside is that the airport was attacked and taken over by bandits or terrorists. That's not true.
Military operatives said it took the response team 3 minutes to arrive at the scene. The terrorists were engaged using ground forces and air components.
Yeah, we recovered 2 motorcycles and then we called on the air, who scrambled a helicopter to engage them. And according to the air reports, about 12 of them were killed. But normally, again, we are waiting for intelligence on the ground there to confirm this, which we'll get by today or tomorrow. We'll get that details of the casualties after the airstrikes. We have layers of security in this airport here. This is just the first layer. There are other layers of security. If we didn't have such layers of security, it wouldn't start taking our men just about 3 minutes to get to this place here. It took them just 3 minutes from when the shot was had to when they got here.
The military says since the breach of security at the Nigeria Defense Academy, it has heightened security around Kaduna Airport and its environs.
We have deployed to the airport here the mobile air defense team. They are permanently on the airport, and these are well-trained guys that can respond to such things. Then in addition to that, we have Operation Badamamaki, sponsored by the Nigerian Air Force, also covering the entire area of the airport and the road up to Barakalau, Rigashiku area. And this is also complemented by the state government internal security operation, Operation Yaki. So the airport is safe. The airport is safe. Passengers have absolutely nothing to worry about.
The Kaduna State government says it is mobilizing residents around the airport area for intelligence gathering.
Security cannot be left in the hands of the military, police, and government alone. It's a two-way traffic. People need to come in, and that is why government is mobilizing communities around the airport general area by way of increasing human intelligence so that we can be able to have an edge over them.
International airports around the globe are highly secured areas. It is hoped that security operatives will put more efforts to protecting lives and property within and around airports in the country. Nisi Gabriel, Arise News, Kaduna.
Arise correspondent Nisi Gabriel now joins us from Kaduna for updates on the terrorist attack in the north-central state of Nigeria. Nisi, great to talk to you on a very sad morning. Give us some updates. What is it, we ought to know? What really happened? Was the train bombed? What's the nature of the casualty? Have they deployed the manifest? Have they contacted the families of people on the manifest? What's the exact number of people on the train? There are a lot of questions on the minds of Nigerians this morning.
Good morning, Rufai, and to the rest of the team. Indeed, it's a sad day here in Northwest Kaduna. As a matter of fact, I think we have before us a national security crisis in this country because what happened yesterday is tragic, devastating, and shouldn't be tolerated. Because as I speak to you now, I'm standing at the Rigasa train station. And what I can see behind me or beside me, all around me, are people waiting to see their loved ones. They are sad. If my cameraman can pan, you can see the environment around me. People are sad, they are grieved, they are pained because they just can't explain what happened yesterday night. And they are waiting for their loved ones. Because from the reports we gathered late last night, we heard that the Abuja-Kaduna bound train took off from the Idu train station at about 6 p.m. and was supposed to arrive Rigasa train station here in Kaduna at about 8:40 p.m. But the train didn't show up. We further gathered that an improvised explosive device was planted on the rail track, forcing this particular train in question to derail. And these terrorists forced their way in after shooting sporadically at passengers. They forced their way into the train, killing many, abducting many. So it's a sad situation we have before our hands. Because a few minutes ago, I was opportune to speak to an eyewitness. He's a staff of the Nigeria Railway Corporation. And he narrated how the incident happened because he was there. He managed to escape. He said he and one of the drivers were lucky to escape. And how did they escape? They hid themselves in the toilets of the train and locked themselves from inside. That's where the terrorists could not gain access to them. But narrating his ordeals and the ordeals of other passengers on that train, he said these terrorists stormed the train. They ransacked properties, belongings of passengers, looking for what they can cut away with, looking for money they can steal. They shot sporadically, killing many, injuring some. And those who tried to flee, who tried to run into the bush, the terrorists had some other guys stationed outside, shooting at them. And it's just a sad situation when you listen to these kind of stories, because something similar happened late last year. And I think they were just testing the waters. And one would have imagined that security operatives, though they are doing their best, but one would have imagined that more efforts would have been put in place to see that train leaving Abuja to Kaduna are highly secured. So it's a sad situation we have here. Most of the persons around are aggrieved. They've refused to speak to us. And as a matter of fact, some are shedding tears because I spoke to a lady who said one of our colleagues was on that train and she has been declared dead. So it's a sad situation we have before us, I must say.
Nisi, I'm completely horrified. And I want to go back to what you said about the attack last year, testing the waters, to use your words, which are appropriate here. What we heard last year was that there was an explosion, but then that was the work of vandals. I distinctly recall that. And now it's been escalated to a terrorist attack. Can we have more detail? When you say more ought to have been done, we were also told at the time that they would have like police presence on board trains. Was that the case yesterday? Has that ever been implemented? What happened with that?
Well, as rightly said, the Nigeria Railway Corporation, as of last year, did report that what happened was the handwork of vandals. But be it as it may, we all know that an explosion occurred late last year. So that's why I did say they were actually testing the waters. Well, for the incident that happened yesterday, we gathered that 960 passengers were aboard that train. And going back to the question Rufai asked, we are yet to hear from the Nigeria Railway Corporation if they've released the manifest, because as at late last night, the Kaduna State government did say it will liaise with the Nigeria Railway Corporation to ascertain the number of persons that were on that train to see if it matched the number of persons that were rescued from that train. So we are waiting to get official figures, casualty figures, number of persons that were kidnapped, injured, and those that were killed. So we are waiting for these reports from the Nigeria Railway Corporation and even the military.
Well, what we know is that the Kaduna State government says that when this happened, the government tried to get the military to get involved. Now, what is your assessment of the extent of the involvement of the Kaduna State government? 2, there have been reports, conspiracy theories perhaps, maybe, in terms of what actually led to this. One report says the bomb was planted on the train. Another report says, no, it was at a particular point. What are the details that we know? But what we're all certain about is that people have been traumatized, people have been killed, people have been kidnapped, and the Kaduna State government is asking for the manifest. Is there even a manifest? And we're told, okay, the people involved, they are between 970 and over 1,000. What are the details in this regard?
Well, Dr. Abati, starting with the latter question you asked. Well, what we gathered, because I spoke to an official of the Nigeria Railway Corporation, and he said the explosive was planted on the rail track. So it was upon the train getting to that particular location, it exploded. So that is what he said, according to the railway staff who was on that particular train. And going back to the efforts of the Kaduna State government, I do know for one that indeed the Kaduna State government, through its Ministry of Security and Home Affairs, led by Samuel Aruwan, have been doing a lot. They've been supplying, in fact, they are behind the Operation Yaki, you see, in Kaduna State. But it goes beyond that. Issue of security is a collaborative effort. All hands has to be on deck. And you agree with me that in these parts of the country, in this region, there are no enough boots on ground manning critical government infrastructure, because one would, it's never heard of that terrorists will attack a train station, a railway line, because the railway line, the Abuja-Kaduna railway line, is assumed to be one of the safest means of transportation to this part of the country. So what happens next? That is the question on the minds of many, because there is apprehension, tension everywhere. People cannot freely or confidently ply the roads, and now they are scared of plying the train. So it's a scary situation we have before us, and many persons need more than assurances from the federal governments at all stratas, I must say.
All right. Thank you so much, Nisi. But there's a tweet out there that says, from the Nigeria Railway Corporation handle on Twitter, albeit unverified Nigeria Railway Corporation handle, dear passengers, due to unforeseen circumstances, train operations along the Abuja-Kaduna route has been temporarily suspended. Further communication will be given in due course. That's a tweet that got out this morning. Thank you so much, Nisi, for your work out there. And we just pray that people are safe out there. That's all on News Headline. We'll take a short break now. When we return, we'll have Rod Sodiri, Market Wilson, and this one more on Aaron Akedal to give us updates on global business, COVID-19, and sporting activities across the globe. Stay with us.
Welcome back to the morning show here on Arise News. Our dependable Rota Sadiri is here to give us an African business update. Good morning.
Good morning, Tundu. Good morning, Rufai. And good morning, Doctor. We start off with the Central Bank of Nigeria governor. Had some tweets that he put out in the middle of the afternoon yesterday regarding all the speculation around him running. He says, my focus at this time is a robust monetary policy, which is an accommodative stance, and fighting inflation, which is at 15.7% year on year in February, which is now a global problem, building a strong financial system in an increasingly uncertain global economy. He's trying to anchor Nigeria in place. Says development finance, supporting farmers, anchor borrowers program. We had the maize and pyramids and so on around the country, and manufacturers in our self-sufficiency and import substitution drive. raising 15 trillion for the Infraco infrastructure financing, which is supposed to boost infrastructure and non-oil exports, and then building a world-class international financial center in Lagos. It's supposed to rival London and Singapore and New York City and so on, as we support the Buhari administration to finish strong. So this was a response to all the clamor around whether or not he's going to run. And I think it was he put a hashtag that said, "No distractions, please. Please, no distractions. I'm focused on this." So that's what he's put out there on his Twitter handle. So he's put that out there, and there's that. Also. Okay, we do need to address yesterday and the stats that the doctor put out, just to clear up for folks. As far as, remember, we had this, this was last year, August of 2021, where Nairametrics used CBN data to look at the amount of FX education outflows versus budget allocation. So you've got education budgets in orange and then what was spent. Anyway, in total, as at that time, they were saying it was about 28 billion or so. But now, with the stat that was referenced yesterday, initially, the doctor said $36 billion in 1 year. And I was kind of like, I wasn't sure about that. It was actually 36 billion on healthcare and education services over 10 years. That's how much Nigerians have spent on foreign universities and medical tourism over the past 10 years. $36 billion in 1 year would have been nothing short of incredible, and we don't have that kind of money. And then Access Bank, they've also completed their holdco structure. This is exciting. This beautiful chart that you're looking at is the holdco structure. These are the 4 verticals that they're going to be looking at. You've got the Access Bank Group, which is going to be holding interest in each of the subsidiaries, allowing them to run independently while it's separate. You've got Payco, Payments and Switching Services. You've got Lenco, Consumer Lending and Agency Banking. You've got Insurance Brokerage as well. So they're going to be, moving separately. Also, I think it's Access Holdings Co. is what is the new ticker on the NGX that's going to be trading going forward. So, Herbert Wigwe, of course, is the head of the new holdco structure. This, of course, GTCO has done this. FBN Holdings has done this. FCMB has done this. Stanbic IBTC has done. They understand that Sterling Bank is looking to get approval from the Central Bank of Nigeria. It's going to be very interesting in the fintech space, because the banks are now going to be more nimble and now going to be focusing more on fintechs, and they might actually spin off each of those subsidiaries down the line. If you look at what Airtel has been doing with their mobile money subsidiary, MTN, that's in South Africa, looking at those subsidiaries, trying to spin off mobile money divisions. Look at what Airtel has been raising. Access Bank is looking at that. They've got a pan-African footprint, and the fintech space is going to be very interesting, because the banks are going to compete with the fintechs in respect to the payment structure and everything else. So that's what's going on. Oh, and then, you already touched on the Kaduna situation. I mean, we just talked about the airports yesterday, right? And 24 hours later, now you've got the rail situation. So good luck to the governors in Dubai right now who are trying to get investment while all this is going on.
I can imagine. Yeah. I can imagine. It speaks volumes. Real quickly, so when people have holdcos, they just want things to be neater.
Yeah. And
they just want it to be quicker, more nimble, and agile. What I see will happen is the banks are going to fight back, because the fintechs are already taking their lunch. And banks like Access Bank are already investing heavily in tech. I mean, I think they have a partnership, or they have shares or equity in the Foundry, something like an incubator startup system. There's going to be a collusion of some sort between telcos and money.
Yeah.
And I think the space will be further opened up when MTN comes into the party to play, because of the reach. So it's going to be about the database you have and the spread base. So I see, even in the future in this country, just to be able to get market share and get the reach, I see a couple of banks going into telecommunications, albeit providing data services, to be able to have an asset base of customers so they can, fight. Because when you look at the antecedents, it's about the asset base of customers, and that's why the business model is always different. Some start up with e-commerce. Amazon has one of the largest asset base of customers because it started up with e-commerce, then it segued into Amazon Web Services, Cloud Services, AWS and the like. So it's going to be the database of customers you have and iterations of various models across board. So it's an exciting time for business and a lot more money coming into the business.
I was playing tennis. I was leaving, right? I saw an Okada rider get off his motorcycle with his friend, and they're posing for pictures at the TBS bus stop, and they're uploading these pictures. And you have to think about what this means to see an Okada rider get off with his smartphone, sharing pictures with his friend. That's data costs that are there. They're uploading it somewhere. They're going to share it. The reach of telcos and what this means going forward with the bank. Oh my gosh.
Marketplace.
Massive. Doctor, go ahead.
Very excellent story. And Rufai has tried to tell us part of the story behind the story. But is there another story behind the story?
Okay.
These banks, now transforming, saying we are now holding companies and all of that. You know the way it is in Nigeria. So what I really want to hear is that other story behind the story.
Okay.
Behind all this,
Old course.
Okay. Because you may declare that this is not the first bank to do it.
Right.
Is there something else that we need to look at? Is there something else that we need to be worried about as customers of these banks? That's one. Number two, you raised the point about Godwin Emefiele putting out a statement.
No distractions.
I think that's commendable.
Yeah.
Because yesterday on this program, I said, look, as central bank governor, as a man who is in charge of monetary policy and whose, central bank has done quite a lot, we have a duty to raise certain questions. And I think that is clarification is quite important. Okay? And I hope that the people who are pushing him away from his core assignment will also at least listen to some of these messages coming from him. And if there are efforts that should be taken to restrain them, those efforts should be taken. So for me, these are the issues. But as for the bank, Access Bank becoming a holding company, blah, blah, blah. Yeah. No, there's a story behind the story.
Doctor, what's the
that
story?
I cannot figure out.
What's the story?
Not being a banker myself.
I was trying to read your chart, but it kept, moving a bit too quickly. I want to talk about that statistics that you've clarified.
Yeah.
It's $36 billion
the education
over 10
years. Yeah.
It's better, but no less horrific, I have to say.
Course,
we're hemorrhaging all this money.
Right.
And I was watching a report about Indian students who had that awful ordeal that Nigerian students had leaving Ukraine, and why Indian students are going to Ukraine to study in the first case. Look at, what's his name from Google? It was the CEO of
Satya Nadella?
No,
that's Microsoft,
right?
Microsoft.
Even him, they got their degrees from Indian universities, and they're like these tech giants. And so in India, why they are going to Ukraine is not the same problem that we have at all. There are just so many Indian parents who want their children, Sundar Pichai, thank you. They want their children to be doctors, so there's not enough space. That's why they go there. And then they get their degrees from Ukraine and have to come home to India and sit an exam to be able to practice medicine. And over half of them fail those exams because the standard in India is so much higher. Right. And I was watching that in complete embarrassment, total mortification. That is not the case here in Nigeria. We really do have a long way to go. And India is one of those places where we go and we spend our money. When people need surgery, off they go to India.
No, before we go to Mr. Wilson, I guess you were trying to correct the statistics because yesterday I brought up the issue and I said, you say it's 36 point something billion. You say, I said yesterday it was 39.6 billion. The truth of the matter is that even if it is not 1 year, because you were trying to correct that.
Right.
Even if it was 10 years.
Right.
In 10 years, Nigeria spent over $39 billion
That's a lot.
on education, study abroad,
and health,
and also on healthcare. Right?
Yeah.
We should not make light of it.
It's awful.
True. Yeah.
The current foreign reserve of Nigeria is within that range. It's about 39 billion. So over 10 years, you have had a country that used to receive people from other parts of the world to come to UCH Ibadan. That same UCH, I'm sure they don't have diesel to power their generators today, as you speak. If they have, okay, let them quickly send us a text. We announce it that they have it, okay? Now, this same country that students used to come from South Africa, Lesotho, everywhere, Swaziland, to come and study here. at the University of Ibadan, at the University of Calabar. Students of Cameroon and Lesotho and Swaziland, they used to get drunk, and we used to be very angry that they were using Nigerian money to consume alcohol, and they were falling down. And they were chasing our girls. We didn't like it. No. But the same country now, nobody wants to come here.
Have that conversation
No, I'm telling you the truth. They will come, Nigeria will give them scholarship to come and study here. They will be disturbing us.
I'm saying that conversation.
They were spending all their time in the girls' hostel. But I mean, that's not the conversation.
Right.
Then now we're in a situation where Nigeria, nobody wants to come here. Nigerians are going elsewhere. Look, every admission season, you don't want to go to England. Because if you enter the aircraft, all the people inside will be mothers and their sons and daughters.
Taking kids to school. Yeah.
So fathers during that period, you don't travel. Because all the mothers are on the way to England. And over 10 years, we have spent enough money to even revive the education system in Nigeria. So I get your point. You were trying to be exact, to set the record straight. But it does not mitigate the serious problem that we face in the education sector and in the health sector.
Indeed.
I think it's important to make that point.
Very much so.
Rotos, just imagine investing 40 billion in these sectors in the last 10 years in the country.
Sad.
Just imagine.
Thank you.
Moving on now to more business updates. Michael Wilson joins us from London. Good morning.
Good morning. Stocks across Asia Pacific slightly on the up this morning, slightly more optimism about peace talks between Russia and Ukraine, though nothing guaranteed naturally. Hong Kong up 0.5%. JD.com doing quite well there after Monday yesterday saying that there was going to be a share buyback as far as that company is concerned. However, let's not get carried away with all this. The property crisis in China, which we have been talking about in the past, it hasn't gone away. It may have been subsumed by more important news issues, but it's still there. And two companies, Sunac and Shimeo, both shares plummeting. Both of those companies saying that not necessarily going to be able to pay their debts down in the way they should. Japan also, they're slightly worried about a weakening yen, so it's got a lot of government support, that currency. Let's go to the lockdown in Shanghai, which we were talking about yesterday. It's getting tighter there. It is going to put, because it's in the business area of Shanghai, it is going to put a halt on China's financial hub, and that will have an effect on the markets, although the government is saying yesterday that it will support small businesses, SMEs particularly. And also that the outbreak there is relatively modest, but China is very, very keen on this zero COVID policy. Let's continue with China just for a moment, because Hong Kong, which of course is part of China, as it were the shop window, the market, the market into the journey into capital markets from China, often used as that, is now saying that it wants to lift travel restrictions as well. And although Hong Kong has stuck to what it described as a dynamic zero COVID anti-coronavirus policy, it's actually moving maybe towards the rest of the world now. As far as the United States is concerned, let me recap for you that briefly. Futures relatively flat. The Dow up marginally yesterday, regular trading session, not really distinguished by anything. I think that what investors are kind of saying to themselves is, as interest rates are going up, then government bonds become less attractive, and therefore the kind of dividends and all the other capital appreciation they expect out of equities is actually happening. Why be in bonds when you can be in equities? That appears to be the mood at the moment. For his part, Joe Biden has unleashed his proposals for a $5.79 trillion budget. That includes this thing we were talking about yesterday, tax on the wealthy. Now, these has to be said, obviously, in the way that politics works in the United States, these are proposals and it will need to go through their administration. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi says Congress look forward to working on Biden's bold fiscal blueprint, although a number of Democrats are not very happy about boosting military spending in the United States. So we'll see about that. Lots of discussion to come. Let us turn our attention to this country, the United Kingdom, which faces, according to the Governor of the Bank of England, an historic shock to incomes. He's talking about, obviously, the rise in the cost of living. This is the biggest challenge that the Monetary Policy Committee, remember this is the one that sets interest rates, has faced since its creation in 1997. What he's very worried about, something again we've talked about on this programme quite a lot, is stagflation, i.e. rising interest rates and lower growth. That's a real possibility in this country. For his part, the Chancellor, Rishi Sunak, the Finance Minister, has admitted to a group of MPs, talking to them yesterday, that the blip in recent trade performance in the UK might, in inverted commas, he said, might, in as much as you can say anything in inverted commas, but there was a big inverted commas around that, might be linked to Brexit. He also faced a great deal of fire for consigning many people in this country, as Labour put it, into poverty. We talked a bit about that yesterday, and that he didn't do enough in his spring statement to increase benefits. And finally, globally, oil prices have fallen very, very slightly. I do stick by what I was saying yesterday. You know, this is truly day-by-day stuff, and the outlook for the overall energy market and the price of oil looks relatively murky still at the moment. Oh yes, and finally, I need to tell you just briefly about P&O. A second P&O ferry is being kept in port at the moment because of safety concerns. Again, the CEO, just as breaking now, the CEO has been told that he needs to reinstate the jobs of those 800 people who were sacked. So there's a lot of discussion still taking place about P&O. That is the global view this morning.
Good morning. We'll talk about the cost of living in England this morning. British poverty. It's increasing, and a lot of people are beginning to liken this current British poverty to the levels seen in the times of Charles Dickens that made Charles Dickens write books like Oliver Twist that always asked for more food because he was poor. Kind of poverty that was staggering. And that's what the Labour Party is arguing for. Britain has got about 14.5 million people in poverty in a population of a little over 70 million people. And now this year alone, Labour is arguing that 1.8 million people will be added to that number. They'll have to queue up in food banks. Labour is also arguing that Britain is fast becoming the poverty household of Europe. And Rishi Sunak is doing nothing about it. Cost of living is taking a lot of money out of the pockets of people. I called somebody yesterday in the UK that told me that energy bills was £70 a couple of months back. Now it is £230. In a year, well over £3,000 in energy bills. What is happening to the UK?
Well, we'll talk about poverty in a moment because we touched on it yesterday. I talk about Charles Dickens, first of all. It's not like Charles Dickens. There is a National Health Service and so on, which tries to reach out to most people. That is the major change. And there were very few social benefits when Charles Dickens was writing. Charles Dickens was writing over 100 years ago, and about workhouses and conditions like that. It does not compare with Charles Dickens. It's easy to go to that. So I looked at poverty yesterday because we were talking about it. When I left university, I went to work for something called Help the Aged, which was looking at poverty, as there was in this country, for older people and the fact that they didn't get benefits. A person whom I had a lot of time talking to was a guy called Peter Townsend. He founded something called the Child Poverty Action Group. Let me read you about what poverty actually is in this country. It's when somebody lacks the resources to obtain the type of diet or the living conditions which are customary or at least widely encouraged and approved in the societies to which they belong. So what he's saying is it's very difficult to get a measure about this if we're talking about that word, poverty. It is relative. It is relative in every country. And I would point to you, there are places in Europe, particularly in parts of the extended EU, which are much poorer than the UK. So that's number one. Number two, is there a cost? Of course there is a cost of living crisis. There's a cost of living crisis in every country around the world. And for some people in this country, it is a choice between heat and eating. Now that's very severe, but it's still a choice. I'm not knocking it. I'm just saying that's the fact of the matter. I don't know about your friend whose heating bill has gone up from bills have gone up from £70 to £210. I would think that's rather excessive. Ours will probably go up about 50%. He or she is talking about a lot more than that. But I certainly take your point. The Chancellor is under pressure to do something about this, and all the papers over the weekend were talking about a gang rising up against him in cabinet and saying, you should have done more. You have no idea about the way people actually live in this country. If it were me, I'd put Westminster in one of the Parliament in one of the poorest parts of the country, and then they could see how people live and eat or not, as the case may be, and eat or do not heat their homes. That's what I would do. If you want to get politicians understanding what goes on, you've got to put them in the middle of the population, not in the Westminster bubble. I'm sure it's the same in every capital city in the world as well. If you want to find out what's going on, go down to the grassroots. That's what I'd do.
Okay, Michael, two things. Very quickly, what does India stand to gain from buying oil from Russia, despite the fact that the allies have said anybody who patronizes Russia will face sanctions? What is the attraction? Is it a discount? And what is the advantage for Russia, for India? And what is the advantage for Russia, considering the fact that there are problems about payment systems? Now, U.S. budget, the proposal about the tax on just about 25,000 people, 20%, 0.01% of the population, rich people who are in charge of more or less everything. Now they are to be taxed up to about 20%. What difference is that going to make? How is that in terms of a strategy? What's your assessment?
I think the strategy, talking about it politically, plays very well to what the majority of people think, because these people are in a very rich minority and are not touched by the concerns of normal people. So it plays very well. Is it achievable? Don't know. No idea. I cast doubt about it yesterday. I still cast doubt about it. I still feel that those kind of people who are stratospherically rich just move their money somewhere else. I mean, the same thing is happening with kleptocrats in Russia. I mean, if you think that they've been caught by the sanctions, think again. They've merely moved I'm sure they've moved their money around. I mean, there are plenty of newspaper stories about this exactly this morning. As far as India is concerned, yes, as I reported to you, India and Russia have tried to have a sort of, or at least a trading program between them, and India's export minister has already said that what's happening with sanctions in Russia is a huge opportunity for a country like India to export to Russia. That did not get the blessing, as I understand it, of the finance ministry or senior politicians within India itself. So I think that's it's playing pretty dangerously. The fact of the matter is that India can, if it wishes, it can take a great deal of comfort from the fact that it's buying cheap oil, and if it does, China may follow suit. That's the big danger. So it's like a dam bursting, isn't it? One country decides to take advantage of these cheap prices because it's the only way that from a few rays that Russia's going to increase its coffers, then other countries may follow. Let's hope not. But I mean, that's the attraction. There's plenty of cheap oil around, and a lot of it's Russian.
All right, thank you so much, Michael, for your time. Appreciate you. For updates on COVID-19 pandemic, Adeso Amora is here with us. Adeso, great to have you. How's it going? Good morning.
Good morning, Rufai. Great to be here, as always. Good morning, Tundu, and good morning, Dr. Abachi.
Morning.
Morning. Well, let's take a look at the global pandemic toll as provided by the Johns Hopkins University. We know that over 6.1 million deaths have occurred so far, with over 480 million infections, and at least 10.8 billion vaccine doses have now been administered around the world in countries and territories. Well, here in Nigeria, the latest data shows that 45 new cases were recorded from Lagos, Rivers, Bauchi, Kaduna, Kano states, as well as the Federal Capital Territory, in the latest data released by the NCDC. Meanwhile, the vaccination agency in Nigeria says there's been a nearly 20% improvement in vaccine uptake across the country in the last 4 weeks. Nigeria has now finally fully vaccinated 10.7% of its targeted eligible population. It took such a long time to get to this feat. We've seen a lot of countries on the continent of Africa, based on this particular percentage of having at least 10% of their targeted population vaccinated. Nigeria has now joined that league, but we still have a long way to go with a target of 70% by the end of this year. And speaking of the continent of Africa, over 250,000 people have now died from the coronavirus since this pandemic began. That's according to the African Center for Disease Control and Prevention, otherwise known as the Africa CDC. The agency, in its latest update, disclosed that there have been at least 11 million cases and with 10 million recoveries. It also shows that Southern Africa has the highest cases and deaths with 5.2 million cases and 82,000 deaths. South Africa remains the leading country on the continent with over 3 million cases and at least 99,000 deaths from this virus, while Central Africa has recorded the least pandemic toll in infections and deaths. The sub-region has 359,866 cases with 4,523,000 deaths. Nigeria, on the other hand, has the highest toll from this pandemic in the West Africa sub-region, where a total of 835,358 cases have been recorded in West Africa. West Africa has also recorded 11,330 deaths. For a continent of nearly 1.3 billion people, only a little over 100 million tests have actually been conducted in Africa. Meanwhile, the outgoing director for the Africa Centers for Disease Control, John Nkagasong, who has seen the Ebola outbreak, last outbreaks, AIDS, and now COVID, is warning against complacency. He says complacency is dangerous. In an interview with The Guardian UK, he says nothing compares to the struggles the COVID-19 pandemic brought with it, especially before the arrival of the life-saving vaccines. He also warns that the pandemic is not over, even though cases are beginning to wane on the continent. Nkagasong is leaving the Africa CDC later this year to become the head of USAID's Global HIV Response. He will be the first person of African region to hold that position. And finally, this morning, a nasal spray developed by a team of researchers, including some from the University of British Columbia, has been found effective at treating and preventing COVID-19 in mice, offering hope for future therapeutic treatments for humans. The spray, referred to as N0385, is believed to be first of its kind in treatment. Research published this week in the medical journal called Nature shows that it is effective against the alpha, beta, gamma, delta strains of COVID-19, and those are variants of concerns listed by the WHO as at now, including the Omicron. And the scientists say their further unpublished result of this study actually shows that there are promising signs that this spray could also prevent and treat Omicron in humans, especially the lung cells. The team included researchers from the, again, University of British Columbia, University de Sherbrooke, and Cornell University. So it's first of its kind because they say this could be both therapeutic and a prophylactic. Back to you guys.
Thank you, Adeswa. Dr. Nkagasong's interview was really quite sobering. I think the general theme he was trying to put forward was one of self-sufficiency. But he mentioned, and I actually forgot about this till I read it in that interview, how Africa was so behind in the treatment of HIV/AIDS. We did not get ARBs for a good 10 years before PEPFAR. And really, HIV, that whole scourge, broke out in the Reagan presidency. When you look at it, it was actually, PEPFAR was an initiative of George W. Bush. It did take all of that time. So we're always behind the curve. At least with COVID-19, yes, some progress has been made, but we're not left to linger and just left to our own devices for 10 years while millions of people died. That didn't happen this time, but we're still very much lagging behind the rest of the world, and we just don't seem to learn the lessons. I want to hope and pray that this time, by some miracle, we actually will, and we will be self-sufficient for the next pandemic, since we've been assured that there will be a next pandemic.
Well, Dr. John Inken-Sangsong deserves commendation, congratulations from the entire African population in 54 states, over 1.1 billion in terms of population, for the services that he has rendered. He granted an interview from his base in Addis Ababa to the Guardian of the UK, and it was disclosed that later this year he will be retiring. And it was in the context of that conversation that he made it clear that Africa needs to be self-sufficient. Whether Africa is dealing with Ebola or HIV or COVID-19. And he was speaking from a position of experience. And being self-sufficient will be a challenge for the leadership in Africa. African leaders developing the infrastructure for public health to be able to ensure that they are not dependent on international goodwill and that they can protect their own people. And it was in that regard that he brought up the point about vaccine equity, which he says, yes, has suffered greatly, even under the COVAX Alliance framework. And what is that all about? That the international community will have vulnerable communities. And one major takeaway from him is that, look, there has been a gap in terms of actual delivery and promises. And we all know that. And finally, the point that he made about the fact that, look, this war is continuous. The only lesson that we have to learn from pandemics, whether the pandemic is HIV or is Ebola or it is COVID-19, is that, look, regions, countries must be prepared. You have just disclosed now that he's moving on to a higher responsibility, but I think he deserves commendation for his efforts, for the contributions that he has made. On the other leg of it is the statement by Dr. Moeti. That's her name, right? Matshidiso Moeti, the WHO regional director in Africa, who was also reiterating the point that, look, COVID-19 is still here with us. But Africa, still has challenges that it must address. She was talking about contact tracing, that we are no longer doing enough contact tracing. We're not doing enough in terms of vaccination, which is true. Only about 15% total, in Africa has been, fully vaccinated, compared to the global average of about 57%. If you look at the number of deaths, over 200,000 compared to 11 million infection rate, 10 million, survival rate. Well, those 250 million that died, I think they are also very substantial. So, in other words, Africa still needs to do a lot more in terms of meeting up with the global challenge. But the point raised by the outgoing Inken-Sangsong, about the challenge of vaccine equity, I think is also important. And we had pointed this out, previously, about how the COVAX Alliance is not working, the COVAX Alliance is not working, the Gavi Alliance are not meeting its objectives. Because it will appear that the entire world has moved on. Countries are opening up, whether in Europe or elsewhere, or North America. They're saying, look, we have to learn to live with COVID. But in the meantime, the challenge remains. Now, you brought up the issue about the nasal spray, which is the product of research conducted by Université de Sherbrooke, the University of British Columbia, and Cornell University. The report was published in the medical journal Nature. But we're told that all of this, yes, tested on mice, will still have to be to go through clinical trial. And the major outcome is that with this nasal spray, it's a compound that you can combine, with existing drugs. and that it will help to reduce the spike protein and the cells being infected by the virus. But it will still have to go through clinical trials. But the major indication here is how scientists are trying to stay ahead of the virus and try to develop all kinds of innovations. But nasal spray, this particular research, you recall that the Israelis were the first to come up with a nasal spray solution. You know, they have it also in Israel. But so we'll keep getting these solutions. But what I see here is that the world may have to just live with COVID.
You see, the shocking part for me in all of this is that sometimes I hope and I pray that these guys listen to us when we speak here. All over Africa, you know, I don't even know what to call them now. Leaders, comedians, what is it? I don't even know. Because COVID was supposed to be a turning point for development across board for the health and pharmaceutical sector in Africa. But we have missed the point. We're always too slow. And secondly, the funds deployed, corruption has taken all away. All over Africa today, I am not sure that African countries can still account for all the ventilators that we bought in the early days of COVID. Have those ventilators been integrated to the healthcare system in those countries? Where are all the labs that were built at the start of COVID? Where are all the hospitals that were built at the start of COVID? What of all the money that we should have pumped into research at the start of COVID? By now in Nigeria, we should have a very proper and well-working pharmaceutical company or vaccine provision company. By now, I would have thought we should have revamped, our vaccine production site in Yaba of old, and at least by now, it should be producing some sort of vaccine. But the truth is, nothing happened at this hour. All what COVID has done is it has put money into the pockets of people and their girlfriends, and they have moved on in various contracts. And they leave people to suffer in penury. They can junket around the world in their private jets, albeit with COVID money, while nothing happens to the healthcare and the well-being and the development of Africans that are long suffering. So COVID just shows you the problem of Africa. The problem that we have some people that care so much about themselves rather than the plights of people. And it's always about them. And really, it's a joke.
Yeah.
And they have become comedians.
Reiterating what... Yeah. Well, I understand the point you're making, Rufai, reiterating what Dr. Inka Gesong has said, that we haven't learned lessons. But let me just put it out there that Nigeria is one of the 6 countries in Africa selected by WHO to start producing their own mRNA vaccine any moment from now. The research and the manufacturing are expected to start sometime in March.
Congratulations to us, but somebody would have thought at this one that the same Nigeria that can afford close to $40 billion in medical care abroad could have built its own vaccine mRNA production site with its own private capital in the country, not waiting for WHO. Thank you so much, Nadeswa.